and the recruiter says, you should be in the nuclear program. In every business, our A players could leave us tomorrow and go make more money. And so I did end up in the Navy from 1994 to 2004. And one of the fascinating things as I go around the country and work with leadership teams and we do CEO workshops, I hear leaders say two things all the time.
Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of Trades Talk. I'm here with Jonathan King of Get Strategy Done. And I've had the pleasure of sitting in with Jonathan on a few occasions. I got to see him speak at a Vistage presentation to a group of CEOs, and it really helped open my eyes to what strategy should be in a growing and scaling business. So Jonathan, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Justin. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you. So Jonathan, I've gotten to hear a little bit about your background and some of the things you've done, including being in the nuclear industry and others. Do you want to give the guests just a quick overview of how you got here today and a little bit about your background?
Yeah, sure. So here's I guess a 2-minute movie trailer, but I started my career at 20 years old, struggling to get through college, not doing very well. I think I was 3 years in and had about 34 credits. And so I hit up the Air Force recruiter because my grandfather was in the Air Force in World War II. And I figured, maybe I could figure things out. And while I'm at the Air Force recruiter, the Navy recruiter comes out and taps me on the shoulder and says, hey, how's it going? And gives me, if you've been through the military, they do like a pre-ASVAB test to try and figure out where they're going to slot you. And it was pretty basic, even though I was struggling to get through college. There were some questions like 500 times 2, 1,000 divided by 4. And I finished that, there might have been 100 questions. I finished it up. I didn't miss any. And the recruiter says, you should be in the nuclear program. And so I did end up in the Navy from 1994 to 2004 in the nuclear program. And one of the fascinating things as I go around the country and work with leadership teams and we do CEO workshops, I hear leaders say two things all the time. One is some version of the younger generation sucks. And then the second thing is you got to be here a long time to know how it works around here. And it's interesting as in the nuclear program, the Navy's operating 100 nuclear reactors all over the world at any one time. And they're being operated by a bunch of college dropouts like myself. And good luck finding any of those college dropouts that have been there longer than 4 years. You just can't do it. And so there's some things as we work through that around leadership, about process, about discipline, about what are the habits, what does training look like, and those things we can apply directly to businesses. And so when I got out of the Navy in 2004, I went into a variety of supply chain and operations leadership roles in mostly Fortune 500 companies, sort of turned into Mr. Fix-It turnaround positions. I learned really quickly that those mindsets and those skills and those practices that the Navy has in the nuclear program pretty directly relate to how to turn around a business. And it almost always comes down to people and process. Any problem we have in our business can be fundamentally pointed back to one of those two things. And so I got really good at executing those turnarounds. And in 2017, launched a consulting practice, which really brought those Mr. Fix-It kind of people and process, how do we work on strategy approaches to small and mid-sized businesses. And we've been doing that work with companies in small and mid-sized sector. We work exclusively with leadership teams, and we really do believe that leadership changes the world. And so almost everything we do is focused on that core leadership team and how we can make that team more effective. And by direction, then the rest of their organizations become more successful as well.
Absolutely. Well, great story. And it's interesting you mentioned process. I was just reading a book called The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday, and it talks about how Nick Saban has, just such an incredible record, and he doesn't talk about winning football games or doing anything else. He just talks about, he calls it the process. And it's like every day is about the process, every play, every drill. It's not about the end result. It's about doing the process in the moment. Where do you think most businesses get it wrong when we start talking about strategy? It's a buzzword. Everybody says it. Hey, you got to work on your strategy, work on the business, not in the business. But where do people get it wrong? And then maybe we'll work into how to define strategy ultimately.
Yeah. No, that's a great question. I see two ends of a spectrum, and then I'll take it back to what you mentioned around process. So the
Yeah.
first is, I think our initial thought when somebody says strategy, or we need to put a strategic plan together, is it feels complicated, right? And so, because a lot of things that we've seen, it is complex, it is complicated, and unnecessarily so. And so then, because our initial thought is, well, it's really complicated, and then we also haven't, in most instances, seen a direct tie to that strategy or that strategic plan actually delivering results for our business. Well, then the second end of the spectrum is, well, that's a waste of time, and we're just not going to do it. And so we really believe the answer is somewhere in between. Strategy should be simple, and it should be something where you do see direct implications and impact to your day-to-day business and the results that you're going to get. And then I think, and so that's a couple places where we go wrong. We either overly complicate it, so that it becomes meaningless, or we don't do anything with it, which then we aren't making any progress there. And so I think those are two things. And then I think the other place where I see teams go wrong, and this ties back to what you mentioned around the obstacle is the way and the process, and around winning games. I think a lot of times what we see are strategies are way too focused on outcomes. And so we're focused on winning the game, so to speak, and we don't have enough focus in our strategies on, well, what are the habits, what are the process, what are the actions we take every single day, every single week, that lead to the outcomes we want over time. And so that's, I think, probably a third place where we see strategies go off the rail, is an oversized emphasis on outcomes versus habits and actions.
Yeah, I've definitely been in that bucket where we've had like a strategic planning session and we feel like we've created this really complex plan that looks great on paper or a whiteboard. And then 90 days later, we're back in the same room and we're looking at it like, guys, we didn't do any of this. We didn't look at this. It was too complex. It wasn't even a operational plan. You couldn't put it in play. It was just this like really aspirational idea of the future, maybe of this future state, but not, okay, here's what we need to do every day. And I think when you're in a smaller business, one, two, three, $5 million in revenue, your leadership team is usually just you and maybe a few others. I mean, it's a really tight group of people that are very much in the business day to day. And that was our biggest challenge, I think, as we scaled, was what you said is you can build a really nice plan on paper, and with AI, this I think is going to be even worse because it's
Yeah.
really easy to build an overly complex plan and then no one's using it. How do you connect those two, Jonathan? Like, how do you drive action to a strategic plan and actually make progress?
Well, so I'll give you a really good example, that it's pretty recent. So Q3 of last year, 2025, Chipotle released their quarterly earnings, their Q3 quarterly earnings, and they missed. And so the presentation to Wall Street was, well, the reason that we missed is because the demographic of customers making less than $100,000 a year, um, aren't coming to fast casual dining anymore, right? Store traffic's declining. And so I think one of the things, when we put a plan together, a lot of times teams are looking at all of these external factors that we're trying to solve for. But if you actually go to Chipotle recently, in the last 6 months or so, I can tell you the three reasons why their store traffic's declining. Number one, their stores are dirty and gross. They're just not
Yep.
clean. Number two, their employees aren't very friendly. They have their backs turned to you. And then when you ask them to put whatever you want on your burrito or your bowl, they act put off by the fact that you're even asking for it. And then number three, their food, while it's promoted to be fresh, it actually isn't very fresh anymore. They scrape the bottom of the pan way too many times. And so when you talk about, well, how do we connect our strategy to like our day to day? Well, those things are all day to day, right? How your employees treat and greet your guests and your customers and your clients, how clean and what quality is your product and service, and then what is the experience. Those are all three things that are part of your strategy, and they're probably really boring for most leadership teams to work on those three things, but when you get it right, I mean, it makes a huge difference in your business. And that is an actual strategy. And then you don't have to worry about traffic because traffic takes care of itself because people will be lining up to go. Here in Texas, I'm in Dallas. We have
Yeah.
this gas station called Bucky's. And I mean, there are people lined up on an interstate exit to go to Bucky's. And do you know why? Because they have clean bathrooms, right? And so for
Nice.
them, clean bathrooms is a strategy. And they've executed very well on clean bathrooms. And every other convenience store alongside the interstate is dirty and gross. And people drive right past it. Right. And so those are some little examples of what are the things you do every day and how do you get your employees, engage your employees every day, and what's the thing that matters. And so many times, and I think the reason why strategy feels complex is because number one, we don't make decisions. And so when we make decisions and we filter and we get really clear on what's most important, well, now we can start to narrow what it is our strategy looks like instead of the 100 things that is possible for every business to chase after. And then we end up with a 3-ring binder. Nobody knows what's really important. And we're all working on different things versus maybe your thing is we just need to have really clean bathrooms. And that can be a differentiator for you.
I really like that. It's almost, I think for some people listening like me, it's almost refreshing to hear this because the truth is you don't have to be great at every little tiny thing in the business and every step of the process. If you can identify one or two or three things that your customers really care about and you can do those two or three things really well, then you can be quite successful in almost any industry. And so when we're thinking about this, are there any tips that you have to identify what are these one, two, or three things that we really should do? Maybe I won't say the best at, but we should do really well at.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of identifying it, I think most businesses that have been in business for 5 years, there's something that we've done that has gotten us to where we are. And usually there's a couple of things that have been instrumental to that success. And what I find most teams doing when, you talked about when you're, 1, 2, 3, 5 million, 10 million, even 20 million and up to 50 million is we actually got really good at something. But then what we do, because we want to continue to grow, is we think we have to find the next thing. And the reality is for most businesses to continue to grow is, especially at that size, you're still relatively small to the bigger market. And so if you found the thing, then what if you did 2x of that thing or 3x of that thing or 10x of that thing? What impact would that have for your business versus trying to go find the new shiny object? So part of what our guidance is to team is look backwards. What's gotten you here? What is that thing? And then if you know what the thing is, find that thing that works and do more of it. Just keep hitting the repeat button and get better at it. Dial it in, and you can usually find you can usually unlock significant more growth for small businesses through that mechanism versus chasing a bunch of shiny objects that may or may not you may or may not be good at it, and your team may or may not be passionate about it.
Right. Two important categories that you want to hit, right? Is like you got to be good at something and your team should be passionate about it. It's interesting you're bringing this up because I think there's a lot of team members at K&D that listen to this podcast, so they're probably like, oh, I'm so glad Justin's hearing this because this is like my biggest weakness as a CEO is I'm definitely the shiny new object CEO of, okay, we've got this dialed, now let's add this, now let's add that. And what I'm realizing is in 2025, I really figured some of this out, but it's coming more and more clear is we don't necessarily need to add more things, but to grow, given our geographic constraints as a landscape business where we're delivering, service through people, growing geographically means doubling or tripling what we're doing, what we're really good at, just in new markets. And it's actually been this really cool, exciting thing. We just started a new market today, 3 hours south of our headquarters. And our team is just like running all the plays that we've ran here. And it's working super, super well. And I'm getting texts from the clients like, this is amazing. I've never seen a landscape company do this. I was like, Oh yeah, we've been doing that for 10 years. It's just part of what we do. There's like, that's not even our coolest thing. Wait till you see what we do next. But I'm
Yeah.
realizing like what we've been doing for 10 years is why we scaled from 1 to 20 million. And if I can expand geographically, I don't have to continue to optimize like this lake that we're already in. So it's pretty
Yeah.
exciting time for us in that regard. So with that, I want to talk about people because you mentioned the people need to be passionate and they need to be good at this thing or these things. And it's a category we probably often are frustrated by. We just don't understand why people don't are just not as passionate as we are, maybe as owners or founders or the leadership team. And you're just like, why aren't they doing what I do? Why aren't they working 20 hours a day? I mean, so how do we start to understand our people better, whether it's through compensation or clarity of role or what have you? What's kind of your take on the people component of strategy?
Yeah. Well, I think number one, for all of us that are entrepreneurs and we've started businesses, um, our team isn't going to be as passionate about the business as we are. They're not going to be invested as they haven't put everything on the line, right? So they just have a different way of looking at it. So I think that is probably the first place to start. Is just um, our expectations in terms of our team being invested as much as we are. I think we need to level set there, right? That's first. But then secondly, I do think we have a responsibility to engage our team and engage the people that are along on the journey with us. For we that's our responsibility as leaders to do that, and I think we do. Have an obligation to do that beyond compensation. And so I think so many times I hear leadership teams and I see CEOs and I see business owners think it's all about the money. And I mean, let's take this conversation back full circle to Simon Sinek. You talk about his just cause, the concept that he extols in his book, The Infinite Game. Um, our people aren't here. They're not with us for the money. They're here because of that just cause and that thing. And so, our in every business, our A players could leave us tomorrow and go make more money. They could.
Yeah.
It's a fact. Our A players, maybe not our B and C players, but our A players could 100% do that. And so the question is, why don't they? For all of us, why do our A players stay with us? And the answer is that on their own, they've identified what their just cause is that relates to the business. And so they choose to sacrifice, they choose to give up the opportunity for more money somewhere else because they believe in this thing that we're building. They believe in this thing that we're doing. And so I think from a people perspective, it's our responsibility to dig around for that just cause, to dig around for that purpose, and then have a mechanism for clearly articulating and communicating that purpose to and with our employees and the people that are partnering with us so that we're able to tap into that as motivation, as an engagement device. And now we're going to be in a much better place rather than just throwing more money at people. And so one of the things we've done, in addition to our strategy work, is we've developed a model called the 6 dimensions of compensation, and that model talks about financials only one of the 6, and so you've got 5 other dimensions that matter to people as we work alongside this journey. There are things that motivate us, there are things that engage us, and those things change. Those dimensions change as we go through our life and as we go through our career journey. What matters to an employee in their 20s is very different from what matters to an employee when they're in their 30s and they've got kids now. And then maybe as you get into your 40s and your 50s, and now those kids are going off to college, and now maybe you're a caretaker for your parents. I mean, the things that matter to us change really significantly. And money might help solve some of those things, but it's certainly not the only thing. And if we don't know our employees, we don't know our team members to that level, then we're missing out on opportunities to fully engage them and really be partners in one another's success.
Yeah. Well, and when you're employing someone, so to speak, it's really this interesting relationship that some people I think about is just a transition of I'm going to give you money, you're going to do this thing, and we're going to keep going. And maybe it starts like that for the first, after the interview, but Yeah, I'm totally with you of like this is this partnership that you have to build. And I've had team members exactly go through that phase. Like Jeremy, he comes to mind. He's like started with us with very young kids in his late 20s, and now he's in his 40s, and it's totally different for him. And that transition is something that I'm super proud the business has been able to keep up with, but it has its challenges. When we talk about this idea of just cause, and people, I think, if they've listened to this podcast, they understand Simon Sinek's the why behind the what, and having a bit of a purpose. But just cause might be a new concept for some, or a new term for some. Could you maybe explain the just cause a little bit, just so we're all speaking the same language, and then we can talk about how do we communicate that to our team?
Yeah. So the just cause is, I like to say, we use it as a substitute for most gobbledygook vision statements that exist out there, right? And so
Yeah.
it is that thing that your employees will sacrifice for to make a future state come true, right? So it's this future state that doesn't exist, but we're willing to commit our blood, sweat, and tears to make come to life. And that's really the reason why our employees are staying with us. And so this just cause, I like to think about it in terms of who we're serving. So who is it we're doing this thing for? And then why does it matter? And so that connects that why that Simon Sinek's always talking about. But then also, who are we serving? I think a lot of times in businesses and in vision statements, we talk a lot about us, and we don't spend enough time talking about who it is we're serving. And then the second piece of that is, why does that even matter? And when we can clearly articulate who it is we're doing whatever we do for and why it matters, that's a really deep psychological connection. That's a deep engagement mechanism that we can use, and that our employees can actually gravitate towards and say, yeah, I want to be a part of that.
I totally love that. And do you think that employees that work or are a part of companies that have this really clear who are they serving, why are they serving it for, are just inherently happier in life, and that like creates this really positive feedback loop that they're happier, they create better lives at home, and then they show up better in the workplace, and that culture in the workplace is more positive, which means their clients get a better experience because they're happy when you go to Chipotle, and like the loop just kind of builds better humans and better communities.
100%. I think the flip side of that is what I see in so many businesses where the focus is on revenue and profit. And so all we're communicating as leaders is revenue, profit. And that becomes like, that only has so much runway for an employee, even for a leadership team, and even for a business owner. Like, that's like, it doesn't, it's not really the reason why people are doing what we're doing. And so when we can, yes, uh, revenue and profit is fuel, but it's fuel to serve who we're serving. It's fuel to live out our why. It's fuel to achieve our purpose. It's not the thing unto itself. And so when we are able to clearly define who we're serving, clearly define why it matters, yeah, it's a huge engagement mechanism for those employees and team members. And it's the reason why we stay late. And it's the reason why we put in that little bit of discretionary effort. It's the reason why when something happens, we're willing to jump on a flight on Sunday afternoon, and give up, part of the weekend. It's all of those things, and you can see it in employees when they say who they work for. Are they proud? And do they, when somebody says, "Hey, what do you do for work?" Is it, do they, how do they talk about that? And the ones that are proud about what they're doing, like they deeply understand it, deeply resonates, and they like to be part of that organization because they know at the end of everything they're doing, everything their organization is doing, they're having a positive impact on the customer, they're having a positive impact on their team members, they're having a positive impact on their community, on the world. And those are the things that, um, and it does have impact. I think for all of us, our worlds are increasingly blended. It's hard to separate. It's not like we all go, onto the factory floor for 8 or 10 hours a day and then come home and don't think about it. Our worlds are increasingly blended. And so, I do think it's a cycle, and I think it's interwoven, happiness outside of work leads to happiness inside of work and vice versa. And it's, it becomes a self-perpetuating flywheel of sorts as you start thinking about the employee journey.
Yeah, I've lived that journey, on both sides of that, positive and negative. And you're in this constant state of stress when things aren't going well, or you have a really tough person you're working with. And I think I've spoken to people, friends, family, and you ask them about their job. How's it going? How's it so and so company? Oh, I'm looking for somewhere else. Or you could just immediately tell they discount their involvement with that company. They almost want to act like, I don't know about what they're doing. The leadership team's really disconnected. Like, I'm looking for something else. They define the company as its own thing and themselves as an own individual. And then I've talked to others who are very passionate. Like, my brother-in-law works for this company in Ireland, and I've never heard him say them. It's always us. And he's like, oh yeah, we're working on this super cool breakthrough. Like, he's in semiconductor chips and stuff. And I mean, it's a pretty fun industry, I think, right now. And so it's like, it's all about the team and what we're doing and us. And I think that is so powerful if you can find that. And I feel like some people feel like, okay, well, you don't want to be fake. You don't want to just create this stuff so you can then grow revenue and achieve more profit. This isn't really like a lever necessarily. It is, but it isn't. And so to that point, I want to ask you, when you stop focusing on revenue and you start truly doing your full work on the just cause and building the purpose and focusing on that and focusing on who we serve and why we serve them, in your experience working with tons and tons of companies, what have you seen from those companies when they stop just focusing on the dollars and cents coming through on the profit and loss sheet?
The clients we have that are more clarity around their just cause and their purpose and have outsized focus on living that just cause and have reduced focus on revenue and profit have the most revenue and profit of any clients we work with. The ones that have an outsized focus on revenue and profit have the least revenue and profit growth of any clients we work with. So it is a very counterintuitive approach, and it's a very counterintuitive mindset. But if you have extreme clarity on who you're serving, and you have extreme focus on delivering with excellence service to top quality service to whoever it is that you're serving, you can't not make more money. It's almost impossible, right?
Yeah.
But if all you're talking about is revenue and profit, for the vast majority of our team members, and especially the bigger our organization grows, the less impact that has on our employees. They get really disconnected from that as a message and as a reason for continuing to come in early, stay late, put in extra effort, take the extra trip, make the extra phone call, whatever it is they need to do. But if you know who you're serving and you know why it matters, you will do all of those things gladly.
Yeah, it's so interesting. It's almost like, and we live this. We've done stretch bonuses of like, if we hit this revenue target, everyone's going to get a bigger bonus. And we've rarely hit those targets when we set them. But when we stopped focusing on the revenue and started focusing on the actions, the day-to-day actions, and we're focused on those actions, not because they're going to deliver more revenue, but because they're going to deliver a better service or a better experience. And I tie it back to like being in the gym. And if you're like watching the clock and you're trying to do like a 5-minute hit routine, like the 5 minutes goes like, it's so slow when you're watching the clock. And then if you can't see the clock, but you've got a trainer with you and they're just like, go as hard as you can, I'll tell you when to stop. And they're like, all right, stop. You're like, wait, that was already 5 minutes? That was crazy. It goes by so much faster when you're not watching the clock. So I kind of tie it back to that. I don't know if there's a connection there mentally, but it seems like there
I agree. I mean, we talked about this towards the beginning, but it comes back to process. I think you have to love the process. You have to love the journey. And if you're focused on who you're serving and why it matters, then it helps with the focus, right? In terms of loving of loving what you're doing because it's an act of service. Doesn't feel like an obligation.
Yeah, yeah. It's like you're doing what you love doing every day, and you're rowing in the same direction. And so, question on that: if a company is struggling with hitting their profit goals and hitting their revenue, and they're in a spot where maybe they've taken on some debt over the last year because they've overhired and kind of over leveraged their operation, you're kind of put in a bit of a defensive position where it's like we've got to hit our revenue goals now. Like there's no other option. Super dangerous place to be. We've definitely kind of been in that spot. We kind of are in that spot. What would your message be to those companies when they feel like they have to focus on these things because if they don't, they risk going out of business or another issue happening?
Yeah, I think revenue and profit is an outcome, right? And so yes, we all need some level of revenue and profit. And if we've made some bets and we've made some investments that require us to have a certain level of revenue and profit to support that level of infrastructure we've built, there is a lot of pressure. However, I think for us and what we try to help teams do is go back to, well, what are the habits? What are the actions that are going to lead to those revenue outcomes that you want? And just hitting refresh on your sales dashboard and reporting on your revenue daily or hourly isn't going to make that come true. Most teams don't put enough focus on backing up and looking at, well, what are the activities, what are the actions, what are the behaviors, what are the habits that we can focus on that are actually going to lead to those results that we want. And so we try to shift our team's focus from outcomes to actions and behaviors. And these should be actions and behaviors that we can measure, that we can activate on a daily basis, not something that is very nebulous. Like, for example, a lot of teams like to focus on customer satisfaction, but how many customer satisfaction did you do today? Right? We don't,
Yeah.
that's not actually something you can do. So do you know for your business and for your operation and for your clients and customers, what is the action you can take that leads to 5-star customer satisfaction? Because that really is the end result of a whole bunch of things you're doing organizationally. And so we try to help teams back up. And if you know what those things are and you can get really clear on what those things are and then execute on those, that's the getting strategy done piece. That's the GSD part. That's where you are going to then end up with revenue and profit that looks like it wants to be. And I'll give you an example. We had a
Yeah, please.
construction company that we started working with in 2022. They were about 5 million in revenue. They were just breaking even, and they were struggling to get, if they had a year where they had 100,000 in profit, they were happy and excited, right? And that's not much. That's just like, hey, we're doing a lot of work to scrape by. And so we started focusing on just cause. We got really clear on what are those actions and behaviors you can take every single day with your team members, with your customers. And we just actually had their annual strategy session, reviewed their 2025 results. In 3 years, they finished last year 18 million. So they more than tripled, almost 4x their business. And they went from break even to 14% profitability. And they weren't focused on the revenue. Yeah, they had said, we want to grow, but they were focused on the actions, they were focused on the behaviors, they were focused on the habits. And that is what led to the results that they got. And so, and we've had other teams that started 3 or 4 years ago in a very similar place, and they're still in a similar place, and all they do is talk about revenue. And the lift of moving them towards, hey, well, what are you going to do? What are the things you need to be doing every single day? They're unable to connect those dots, and they're living the results of that outsized focus on outcomes versus habits.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, congrats to that company too. I mean, it's that type of growth is not easy, and to do that with profit. But it's nice to hear those stories because it's true. It's possible for everybody
Yep.
else out there listening. Now, when we start talking about that, and I think this is a good conversation to kind of continue to have and shift into, is this idea of getting outside help. We've believed in coaching since I started. I took over the business from my parents in 2015 and hired a coach, and he brought a lot of insight and perspective, and we had quarterly planning sessions, and having that outside perspective, having a team there to help you see the bigger picture, unwind some of the things that you're doing to understand what success looks like. How important was that? And maybe we can use that construction company as a bit of an example. Is how important is it to start to get outside help, and what are some of the things that you guys do? Let's just use you
Yeah.
guys as an example to help companies break through the rut they're in and that kind of obstacle they've created.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll share my personal experience. I was COO of an organization that was about 15 million, and while I certainly could facilitate strategic planning, I could certainly facilitate quarterly planning sessions. Um, when we brought in a facilitator, I was able to fully participate as a leader in the room, and I started to see things that when I was facilitating myself, I was unable to see for two reasons. One, I was too focused on facilitating, so I actually couldn't show up in the room as the leader I needed to be for the organization to plan, because those are two very different roles, facilitating versus leading. And then secondly, um, I was um, I was unknowingly, sometimes knowingly, but I was steering and I was influencing, not in a positive way, the outcome of those conversations. And so there were things that needed to be discussed that I just either didn't let the group go down that road, um, or just steered it a different way once the conversation started. And so there's several things that I think that every business, even if you're on the very very small end, you're like, we can't afford it. I would say you can't afford not to do it. One of my clients recently said this, and we've been working with him for 3 years, and we had the conversation about, uh, hey, do we want to keep working together? What does that look like? And we facilitate strategic planning sessions for small businesses. That's what we do. And the COO said, there's six of us on the leadership team. Four of us could 100% do what you do. And I said, I agree. And there'd be a problem at this point if you could not. And he said, the thing is, though, is that when we're in these strategic planning sessions, we are making $4 million decisions and sometimes $40 million decisions. And if one of my leaders is facilitating, they're not on the chessboard as a leader. And because we're making such big decisions, I need every single leader on the chessboard. And so I would just say, if you're doing any version of this on your own, you're taking leaders off the chessboard during that planning session. And I think what a third party facilitator does is a third party facilitator helps you see things you can't see. They sometimes ask the dumb question that you're too smart to ask, but it's the thing.
Yeah.
Another example is we have a company that does audio video lighting installations. They're an AV design build firm. And a couple years ago in their annual strategic planning, they were spending, I mean, we spent several hours over multiple different kind of pieces of content we were working through. And this concept just kept coming up of they were spending a lot of time on focusing on logistics and warehousing and shipping things. And after about it was the first half day of this, and I'm listening to it. After a break, I came back and I said, let me ask you guys a question. What kind of company are you? And everybody just kind of looked at me with a weird look on their face. And then I said, are you a logistics company? Or are you an AV design build firm? And they're like, oh my gosh, we're an AV design build firm. And I said, then why are we spending all this time talking about logistics? It was a problem in their business. It was something they needed to solve for. But you know where they are now? They have a third party logistics company that is an expert at logistics and warehousing that is taking all of that. It actually saved them money. And their team is now able to focus on doing what? Being an excellent AV design build firm. they would have never gotten there themselves. They would still be mucking around with logistics and warehousing, distracting them from delivering quality AV design build for their clients. And so I think that's an example of your facilitator is going to help you see things you can't see.
Yeah.
A facilitator can also help you get aligned. I think one of the things we see slow leadership teams down and slow organizations down the most is a lack of leadership team alignment. And so when you get a third party facilitator in, a third party facilitator can help your leadership team get aligned. You should be having really hard conversations. You should be having arguments, and you should be having some healthy conflict that then gets you to making decisions about who we are, who we're going to serve, and why it matters. And then what are we going to do about it? But most teams aren't in a place themselves to be able to have that healthy conflict for a variety of factors. And so a third party facilitator can help with that significantly. And I think the third piece that a third party facilitator does is, and we see this all the time, is where accountability. When you're paying us to come in every quarter and facilitate those sessions, they almost never get rescheduled. But how many times when you have it on the calendar yourself and you're going to self facilitate, something comes up, right? And so then when you think you're going to get together every quarter, well, it ends up being every 4 months or every 6 months, or in some cases, and we see this too, a year's gone by and we haven't even gotten back together to talk about like, oh, well, tariffs have changed a lot in the last year, and we haven't even worked on the implications for our business and what we're going to do. And so I think that third piece is accountability and just making sure you're actually keeping your strategy current, keeping your strategy relevant, and making pivots that you need to make as you progress through time.
Yeah, like double click on all that. I have lived that in every single way of having outside facilitators, doing it ourselves, having outside facilitators that work good, having some that don't work well. But ultimately, all the points you made are so well made, and we've done good on running quarterlies every single quarter. We haven't really missed any, but we've been doing it for 11 years, and we do one for each one of our divisions and then a leadership team one. And I've been involved with pretty much all of them, so well over 150. And I find that when you have an external facilitator, in addition to what you said, they bring in a perspective from the external world that's very valuable, because everything we see is through like these green landscaping glasses. And so like everything we talk about and explain, and our leadership team has been together for a few years now. So we're seeing the same things in the same way. And so sometimes you think you have alignment, but it's almost fake alignment just because you don't ask that second or third question, that if you did, you'd find out that, oh, like Brian and Jeremy actually don't agree on this thing that they both were silent on. Like silent doesn't mean agreement. So when you're trying to make this decision of bringing in a third party person, I think it's almost like it's a must have. And one pushback I get quite a bit from people I talk to about this is, well, the third party person isn't going to understand my business. They're not going to understand our industry. They're not going to understand what we do. So Jonathan, to that point, how do you guys deal with that obstacle and work through that of they don't understand my industry?
Yeah. We're not consultants, right? So we're not coming in as a strategic planning facilitator to tell you what to do. We strongly believe in 90 something percent of cases, the right answers are in the room. And our job is we are experts at leadership team alignment and leadership team facilitation. And that doesn't really change regardless of you're an AV design build firm or a landscape company or a construction company. Doesn't matter. Leadership team dynamics are very similar across all industries, all types of organizations. And so we are really good at that. I think when you mentioned the, you had said,
just like the external viewpoint of understanding the world, or
yeah, that external viewpoint, right? I do think because we work with construction companies and landscape companies and AV design build firms, and we have professional services firms, that breadth we're actually able to bring things that we see. There might be a scorecard or a scoreboard or a metric item that somebody in another industry is measuring that may not be apples to apples, but it might actually inform something that you just don't see. It's not an industry standard, but it actually is a secret. It's a secret sauce for you that actually changes the game, and it's just a little twist on perspective. So I truly believe that our lack of industry specialization and the fact that we do see across a lot of different industries and we see a lot of different client types is a benefit because we're able to think different. And so one of our we have a manifesto that we created for our organization, and one of them is
Nice.
based on that Adam Grant concept of think different, right? And so
Yep.
that's
Love that.
we bring that to organizations. And so if you're looking for a consultant, there are certainly consultants that specialize in their industry that can tell you what to do. But I really believe that most organizations, most leadership teams, if you've got any level of capability and competency on your leadership team, the answers are in the room, right? And probably what you need to do to take your business to the next level is have clean facilities, have fresh food, and have friendly employees, right? And you don't need an external consultant to tell you that, right? You need a leadership team to get aligned on, oh yeah, now how are we going to go make that happen?
Man, I love this because it's debunking so many I think limiting beliefs people have about their business and about where they're at in their industry of and hey, maybe if you're new, you do need an industry consultant to help understand what you're doing. But if you've been doing something for 5 years or 10 years and you're in the business, like you understand what your customers want, what they really love, and you understand probably at a deep level what your business operations need to look like. And it's just a matter of unpacking all the noise, getting the noise out of your head, like the logistics issue, or for us, maybe it's something about like California's banning certain tools and stuff. So we're gonna spend 30 or 3 hours talking about a ban, and really we're just bitching to each other about this thing none of us agree with. And so it's like the external third party facilitators gonna call timeout, 20 minutes in, and be like, all right, guys, let's save that for dinner or something. We'll get back on track here. And
Yeah,
I think we've
yeah,
wasted plenty of days. So when we talk, one question I wanted to ask you is when we talk about leadership teams, it's a term that is I hear constantly, and I think it's a term we don't necessarily define. So
yeah,
how do you define a leadership team in a company? And I'm just going to let you kind of take it from there.
yeah. So I mean, we'll go all the way back to day one of any business, and let's just say you are um, a solopreneur and you start up your business. Well, you are the leadership team, right? And so what does that consist of? Well, there's some things that you're doing as CEO, as president to say, hey, I'm looking to the future. There's some big things there's big contracts I need to go get. There's big relationships I need to establish. There's those visionary things, right? That you need to do. You're sometimes sitting in that role. And then there's roles that I think I break down a business into three things. Every business is these three things. And as a leader, you're sitting in these three roles. One is business development, right? So you've got to go get the business. The second is business delivery. You've got to go deliver what you sold. And then the third is business administration, which for most visionaries is all the BS that we don't like to do, right? But those are the three pieces of every single business. And so at a very core level, every single a leadership team needs to have somebody that are in those core functions and leading those core functions. And if you don't have them early on in a business, generally what that means is the founder owner is sitting in one or more of those seats. And those are the things that end up slowing you down. Now, as your business gets bigger and you move from 1 million to 5 million to 20 million to 100 million, those three roles, there becomes specialization within those roles and it becomes more important. So for example, on the business development side, well, now we're going to have a sales leader and we're going to have a marketing leader, right? And so up to a certain point, generally those roles are combined. As you get larger, you start to see those roles get segregated. On the
Yeah.
business delivery side, uh, that could be one role up to a certain point, and then depending on your business, well, now maybe that looks like we have someone running operations, we have someone running supply chain, two different roles, right? And then same thing on the business administration side, might be one person early on, but as the business grows, now that leadership team looks like, oh, we have a CHRO running human resources, we have a CFO, we've got a CIO, running the IT and tech component of our business. And so a business can go from a leadership team can be very, very small. Um, Depending on the size and complexity of the business, to you can get to a place where you've got 7, 8, 9, 10 leaders in the organization. But I think each of those are, and it can be anywhere in between. But I view the leadership team as who are the core functions, core leaders that are in the room running the business. And we see all kinds of wacky things. I think the wackiest situations generally have to do when there's a family business involved. And that is just, and I think one of the things, ownership does not equal leadership. And I think if we could wrap our minds around that, that would clean up so many things for so many family businesses. That just because you were, won the birth lottery doesn't actually mean that you are a functional leader inside of the business. And I think we could resolve a whole lot of things there. And so we see things like, we'll have two finance leaders in the room. So you'll have a CFO and you'll have a controller in the room. The way we define a leadership team is it is the person that is leading the function. And so you may have other people that are instrumental to the business, and really everyone in your business should be instrumental at some level, but not everybody can be on the leadership team. So I think we need to be really clear on what that looks like and who that is and what is their decision-making authority for the operation.
That is one of the best explanations of a leadership team I've ever heard. Thank you for that. And I couldn't agree more with your point around ownership doesn't equal leadership. And it's a really tough conversation. I've had this with my dad recently last year because he was on the leadership team. He always has been. He's a owner, but his role had become very much of a support engineer / sales role where he was no longer the president or the and his title is on our board docs is president, right? Because it's a proper seat for him. But day to day operationally, he was not acting in the way that a president would act, and he didn't want to, and we didn't want. It was a great situation, but he was kind of on the leadership team. And one day I sat down and said, "Hey, like your role really isn't the leader of any division or component of the business. You're a great asset and you're out there and you're living the exact purpose that you're meant to live today. And what do you think about stepping off the leadership team?" And it was a tough conversation for me to bring up, tough conversation for him to hear. I got to give him so much freaking credit because, he founded the business 40 years ago and he's 61 years old. Like for him to have that humility to say, yeah, like you guys got it. I'm going to step off the leadership team, meaning I'm not in the weekly leader meetings. I'm not in the quarterly planning sessions. I'm a player on the field just like any other person. And he's done that so gracefully. And what it sent a message to everybody else on the leadership team is like, oh shit, like dad's not in the room anymore. Literally, the founder is no longer here helping us and watching us. So with his absence from the room, almost, I say, no, definitely did create more ownership in the room because now there's not this like safety net that someone's watching. So if we miss something like, oh, Kendall will close the gap, like it's on us now. So I just I think more, especially founders and other maybe owners, like my sister's an owner. She's also not on the leadership team. And we want her to be there one day. It's just, it'll happen when it's time. I think specifically that founder seat, they hand it over, next generation takes over, CEO, they get the title, but the owner really doesn't, the founder doesn't ever let go. And they're still in the leadership team, even though they really don't have, it doesn't follow your matrix to stay on there. So I don't know, some advice maybe, like if someone is listening to this and their dad or mom or the founder still sitting around like not wanting to step off, any words of advice for those folks?
Well, I mean, I think you articulate it really well, and you've already shown the path, right? You have the conversation, right? That's number one. And then I think the other thing is if, and that's not an easy conversation to have. I know that, right?
No,
Like that it is
no.
a difficult conversation, and some of those conversations are more difficult than others for various reasons. Um, and if I think one of the things that I would ask is if you're hesitant to have that conversation, what impact is the current situation having on the organization? Like sit with that and dive deep on it and really see what it is, because it's probably more than you think it is. Right. And so for what you articulated is it was there was this little bit of a safety net, or this little bit of, hey, we're riding with training wheels. And then when your dad leaves the room, well, now it's like, hey, training wheels are off kind of thing, right? That's one impact. But in some organizations, the impact is far beyond that. It is massive dysfunction. It actually might be the thing that is holding your business back from where you want it to be. And everyone else, it's the elephant in the room. Everyone
Yeah.
else knows it, and you don't even know.
That's, you know, and that's another reason to go back to the facilitator, the third party, because working with a coach myself has helped me have that conversation. And even like that coach could have that conversation, coach or facilitator could even have that conversation offline with the
Yep.
founder to help kind of start that off, because there's no emotions. It's just, hey,
Right.
I noticed this. My job is to facilitate, so I'm going to communicate this, and this. I'm sure you guys run into that where there's one person on the leadership team who is creating 95% of the dysfunction, and then that conversation has to happen for you guys to keep doing your job.
Yeah, for sure. And that happens outside of the specific instance we're talking about with founder transition. It happens all the time, and I think one of the key or probably one of the biggest impacts that happen through the work that we do is um, leadership teams either get truly aligned, or leaders that are not truly aligned get exposed. And that is either way, that is powerful. And then it requires you to make a decision. What are we going to do? And the teams, this is another one of those big things. When I reflect back over the years and the work that we've done with strategic planning and facilitating strategic planning sessions for leadership teams, the teams that have made the most progress in the time that we've worked together have made a big leadership team move. And sometimes that's developing someone internally in the organization and bringing them into the room. And, for example, like, hey, they needed to split out sales and marketing, and they created space to make that happen. And then they made that move, and that can be a game changer for the business. Because generally the first sales and marketing leader in your organization is really focused on business development and usually is not really good at marketing. And so when you do actually then have the space for someone that's truly great at marketing, that's a game changer for your business. And sometimes the change is there's someone toxic in the room that is putting a limiter on the team's capacity, team's capabilities, and what the team's able to achieve. And once that's identified, and then we resolve that issue, and there's multiple ways to resolve that issue, now the business is able to take off. And we have a lot of teams that experience that as we work through go through our work together.
Gosh, it's so true. It's amazing what one wrong seat can do in terms of impacting the ability of the business. And that could be 100, 500 person company, but one leadership team member could hold that entire organization back from the full
Yeah.
potential. I totally agree. I've seen it. So
Yeah.
the other question I wanted to hit you with as we start to wrap up the episode is there's a lot of M&A and acquisitions happening in the service industries and the trades industries. And it's bringing another level of complexity to this conversation of strategy and leadership and right person, right seat, because you have maybe a parent company buying a number of small companies, or you have two companies merging. So when you see these, let's just take there's a company a little bit larger that bought a smaller company, and they're trying to merge the leadership team. They're trying to merge the cultures, and they're talking about strategy. Have you guys been in that spot and worked through some of those challenges? And is there any like best practices when you're integrating a new company into your organization when it comes to leadership or process or people or strategy, wherever you want to hit that?
Yeah, so we have, and so what I would say is it goes back to due diligence, right? And so I think a lot of times I'm fascinated by how quickly some of these things happen, and it's really almost like a shotgun wedding. And then we get on the backside of it, and it's like, oh my gosh, like our core values aren't the same, or we just we value different things. And so to me, it starts with due diligence. And so you want to get ahead of it, it starts with the due diligence process. How deep are you going to dig, and really making sure that one, your purpose is aligned. So we talked about just cause, but are we really clear on those, and can we make sure that there is some level of alignment? And they don't need to be said exactly the same way, and maybe one of the organizations hasn't well articulated it or even spent time on it, but at its heart and at its soul, there needs to be some connection there. And then I do think there does need to be a lot of due diligence around the culture. I think a lot of companies talk about core values. We try to go another layer deeper and talk about non-negotiable behaviors. And so, are both organizations really clear on what their non-negotiable behaviors are? And if there's a lot of alignment there, and again, they don't need to be said exactly the same way, but at its heart is their alignment on the things we value, um, then that makes everything else easier. Um, and this is not to say I think the thing that becomes really challenging is getting the merged companies' leadership teams aligned. And when we get back up to your leadership team questions, well, who is leading sales now, or leading business
Right.
development? Who is leading business delivery? Who is leading business administration? Those are all ideally decisions and questions that have been answered on the front side. And so then once that happens, there is a true merger of the organization, and we've done our due diligence to make sure that everyone understands what that looks like from a people perspective. Everyone's been heard. We really understand what leadership capacity and capability is between the two organizations, and everyone's been sort of slotted accordingly. And we've had all of those human conversations to make sure that it goes well. And that takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of effort to go through that exercise on the front end and on the back end. Um,
Right.
and so I think for most teams that we see, we underestimate the level of due diligence that's required, and we also underestimate the level of execution, the level of diligence, and the level of care that's required on the back end. Um, it's not one of those things where 90 days afterwards everything's going to be good to go. It's you've got to have a long-term transition plan, a long-term merge plan, so that those things go well. And if you don't, you're going to be. Somebody said this to me last week. It's like your choices. You can either pay for it up front with good planning and preparation and doing the right work, or you can pay for it later, and usually it's 4 to 5x more expensive. So it's your choice. Which do you choose?
That's such a good way to say it. Yeah, I mean, I heard on the same level of just not enough companies are doing due diligence on the people because they're
Yeah,
really good at doing due diligence on the financials and the legal side and the lawyers.
yeah,
And that stuff's black and white. You can look at
right.
something, and if the ratio is this or it's not, the people, to your point, is so much harder to understand. And I think it's important that as you acquire companies, based on what I'm hearing from you, is you get some level of access to the leaders at least during the due diligence process. So you're not closing and signing a deal at a price point and negotiating all of this and never talking to the people who have built the company. I think that's a big miss that maybe a lot of companies have because they're worried about, you know, the word getting out because hey, quote unquote, we're selling the business and now my life's going to change. But like you said, like it is going to change and you should do it up front because on the back end it's going to be a lot harder. Well
Yeah.
said. Jonathan, thank you so much. Like, such a great conversation today. I've got some notes for my business. It's a conversation I think a lot of people are going to come back to in the future. And as we end the episode, I just want to ask you for a trade secret as our signature ending to every show. You've given a lot, but what's a trade secret you want to drop on us today?
Yeah, so I mean, I think we've pulled on this thread a lot today, but I think if there was one, I would say organizationally, measure your habits weekly, measure your outcomes monthly.
Awesome. Well said. Nice and simple too. I like that. So if people are listening to this, maybe they're thinking, hey, a third-party facilitator sounds pretty good after this conversation. What's a great way to get a hold of you and your team over at Get Strategy Done?
Yeah, just right there. Go to www.getstrategydone.com. All of our information's there, our pricing, how we work together. So we're super transparent. And we believe in simple, and we believe in putting things together that actually people can actually execute and deliver on for their organization.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. Have a great rest of your day. And folks, thanks for listening.
Thanks for tuning in to Trades Talk, where the next generation of disruptors comes to raise the bar. If you got value from today's episode, share it with someone in the trades who's ready to level up. For more tools, insights, and community, follow host Justin White and join the movement at jwhitegroup.com.